as well. So to lead off the first of five questions, we're going to bring in Lynn Josephson for this and really talk about the structure of the club. So it's important for you as a consumer when you sit down and meet with the membership director to understand the structure of the club as a whole. Is it a bundled community, which means it has a different term in different markets across the country? Is it member owned? Is it developer owned? Is it a corporate entity? Because each one of those different management structures are going to lead to different questions that you'll have to ask the membership director. So, Lynn, if you wouldn't mind, can you share what just some thoughts about club structures and maybe some pros and cons of each?
Sure. Thank you, Jason, and welcome everybody. I'll start at the top with the bundled versus non-bundled. A lot of people are not familiar even with that term. A lot of people that are coming down to the Sun Belt areas. Bundled communities can, like Jason said, can be different in different areas, but bundled typically means when you buy a home or a villa or condo or whatever within a bundled community, gated community, it means that your membership is included with the property. So you do not pay an initiation fee, anything over and above other than maybe the annual dues that would cost to go along with that. So on the surface, it's very attractive and it's good for starters to get people down into the area. But one of the downsides of a bundle community is just remember that you need to ask how many homes are going to be built in here, because essentially it means that every person that owns a home has access and a right to play golf there. So as it develops and gets filled out, it may be a little crowded to play golf. So you need to ask that number, and tee times may or may not be hard to get. Member owned is probably the ones that we're most familiar with, and member owned is controlled by the members of the club. They have equity ownership in it, and they're responsible for any capital improvements or assessments that may come along the line. Down here in South Florida, there's many developer-owned facilities because we're still new, and communities are started out by the developer. And then when they fill out and sold out all of their homes within those areas, there starts to become a transition where it will switch over from management of the developer to a board controlled by the membership. And that's over a period of time, and it's a time that the members really will start to get in and take a hold of ownership of the club as a developer leaves.
Lynn, I had a couple questions here for you to elaborate on bundled versus non-bundled. A lot of South Florida clubs in particular that have bundled atmospheres have what's called the Chelsea Tee Time system. Can you just share with listeners what that is and what they can expect when they're trying to book a tee time?
Yeah, sure. Good question. Chelsea Tee Time system is just a management of tee times to where it automatically distributes times that the members play. So it doesn't give any preference to anybody they always get in the same tee time by walking into the golf shop. It's done through an automated system. And it does a good job, but the reason that they have to do that is because there's just so many people playing. And again, it's directly tied to how many homeowners there are within that development. So if you are exploring bundled communities, start to ask, what's the total number? What are the chances through the Chelsea? Are you on a Chelsea Tee Time system or any other kind of tee time system that will allow me access to the golf course? So that's very typical within the bundled facilities.
And is it fair to say that if a golfer and golf enthusiast wanted to play 4, 5, 6 days a week, that generally the Chelsea Tee Time system or a bundled atmosphere is probably not the right setting for them?
Yeah, as a on the surface thing, if it is an active person, it's funny that you say that. I just left a place where we're having some frame things, and the people joined a bundled community down there, and he says, look, I only play one day a week, and maybe one other day I'm not a thing, and so he said it works just fine for me. But when we run across people that do, you're right, just playing that many times, it does get a little bit frustrating for them, but they'll get into a men's league, and different things. But yeah, it's can be cumbersome.
Okay, and then one final question for you, Lynn, on the developer-owned clubs, and if someone was listening today and they're getting ready to invest in a club membership at a facility that is currently owned by a developer, what can they expect during that transition time of turnover to the members in terms of is it is it an easy thing to go through? Is it can be more difficult than it sounds? Well, you've been through a couple. What are your thoughts?
I've been through, yeah, a couple, and Jason, every club's documents are written differently, and especially from if you're going as a homeowner, you're going to have documents that says what you can and can't do, and all of them have a what they call a transition period or a turnover period, based on when if they sold a majority of the membership. But within those documents, it can say a lot of things, Jason. A lot of those turnover where there's no monies that change hands from the equity membership, and the club, the developer just turns it over, and then they're responsible for all operations they're going after. There's other documents, and I'm aware of one of them that once the members take over, they're responsible for like a $2 million a payment to the club. But a lot of that stuff is negotiated out with the board. And they can be good. They're generally pretty tenuous because there's arguments back and forth. But it all gets resolved, and when it does, the members feel better that they are now in control of their own destiny.
Very good explanation of that. Thank you, Len. So we're going to bring Karen Fleming here to help with this question. And one of the big things that a consumer can ask to a membership director of a club is, are there or will be there renovations for the club in the future? Last year alone in the state of Florida, over $1 billion was put into capital improvements for different club amenities and the golf course and whatnot to basically attract you as the consumer for the future. And so it's so important to know that ahead of time so there's no surprises a year after you become a member if the club is going to pass a master planned capital improvement, that you don't get hit with a major assessment and get those numbers ahead of time, or at least the plans ahead of time before going in there. So Karen, can you talk two things? Number one, about how important that is for the club to reinvest into the future. And number two, as a membership director yourself, did you oftentimes get that question from consumers, or should they have asked you that?
Absolutely, Jason. It's funny because in the beginning of my club career, this question didn't get asked a lot. There wasn't a lot of consumers who came to me and asked about assessments pending or past. But by the time I finished my career, and obviously we'd gone through the 2008, 2009 years, customers had become a lot more savvy about such things, and the question was absolutely inherent in every conversation. And it is important for clubs to reinvest, and it is important for the consumer to ask questions. It's very easy for the existing membership base to get comfortable and be complacent and think, oh, it's perfect the way it is, we don't need to change a thing. But you want to look for a club that is willing to reinvest and spend money on improvements and maintenance, because that's what's going to attract new members. And you simply have to have new members coming into the club to keep your club viable. It's very, very easy to ask the membership director, what's your history of assessments? Do you have any assessments pending? What were the costs of those assessments, or what are the costs of the coming, can we expect? And they should know the answers to those questions and be happy to share that information with you. I was always happy to answer these kinds of questions, pleased when they were asked, offered the information willingly if I had knowledge of something that was going down. So I think that it's very important that you seek a club who's willing to make capital expenditures, and it's important that you ask questions about what your costs are today and what they're going to be in the future. And I think that it's never a bad thing for you to ask for an annual report. They shouldn't mind providing you with that information, and it's a great way for you to see how fiscally sound the club is that you're considering.
Yeah, I agree, Karen. One of the common thing for consumers we should ask anyway is the depreciation of assets at the club. And a lot of clubs aren't necessarily looking at that. Are their assets depreciating, and are they keeping enough of the dues and the capital reserve monies to combat that? Because over time, that could hurt the overall value of the club. And for those of you that are parlaying this search with club with real estate, this is also very important. I mean, the renovations to the club and the club's amenities are directly going to affect the real estate market values of the homes that you buy in those communities. So very, very key things. Karen, when I'm sure you went through a couple of capital improvements and renovations itself. Was the real estate an important piece to the decision process for the board?
Well, the first club that I was with, Hague Point, was during the developer model, and so the real estate was obviously very imperative. With my final club, we were not real estate dependent, so that didn't have as much impact as it would in, say, a bundled community. But it inherently, if a club is inside of a gated community or any nice neighborhood, the success and vibrance of that club is directly related to property values within that community. So it does behoove everyone for a club to do well, regardless if they're a member of the club or simply a property owner nearby. It does have an impact. A club, I think I saw the statistic once that home values were approximately 20% higher in a neighborhood with a nice club. I feel like I came across that in a study once.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me if it's directly aiding to market values.
And with the depreciation of assets, I think a good question is simply to ask, is that a schedule that they manage? Are they at least paying attention to it? Because a lot of clubs don't even run a schedule. That's another good reason to ask for that annual report.
Very good. Well, thanks, Karen. And John, I do got your question here. I have it on the chat. We're going to get to that here shortly, so hang in there, and we'll ask that question with Lynn specifically. Karen, keeping on you on the line here to answer some of these. How can a consumer, besides the golf course, the amenities itself, get involved, meet people that mind like they are, view the same things, basically going to be friends once they become a member at a club? Because that's the most important part, in my opinion, in the social expectations of the whole club membership. What are some things that you would ask as a consumer to the membership director about how you can get it ingrained into that culture before you invest?
The first suggestion I have is, when you begin considering a club, ask if they have a newsletter and if you can be placed on that distribution list, because that's just a really great way to get to know a club. When you see their social calendar and the pictures that they post, whether it be their Facebook page or an actual physical hard copy newsletter or an online something that you can see from their website or an email that they send from time to time, ask to get some exposure to that, because that's a great way for you to develop a feel for them in a sort of virtual manner. Clearly, asking about demographics is very useful, and your membership director is going to have that information. I encourage you not to get incredibly hung up on age. It's certainly not the average age of a club, perhaps more focus on the average joining age, or just how many comrades do I stand to make that look like me, so to speak, because that's really what's important, is you want to meet people with whom you like, and that they're going to be able to answer that question. They're going to have planned for that, and most programs or most clubs like my club had an ambassador program, and we had members who were ready and willing to play golf with you, to invite you to a function, to introduce themselves. We tried to introduce you to other members as we were going around the club during the tour. When my prospective candidates had a scheduled meeting, I would let my membership committee know. Sometimes they'd pop in and introduce themselves while we were having our meeting. If it was a walk-in, then you try to introduce them as you're going about the club. And there's usually quite a few opportunities to meet someone, to discover something about the club and have some sort of a feeling develop as to, you know, is it warm and friendly? Is it stiff? Is it, you know, clicky? That was a word that was used a lot. And I think it's important that you let them know a little bit about yourself so that they can help you get to know them and they can get to know you as well.
Very
Hey,
good.
Jason,
You know,
can I jump in?
yeah, go ahead.
Jason, jump in there just a minute, you know, and that's the beauty, and that's what I love about our company, Golf Life Navigators. And when they fill out a pro guide, the consumer fills out the pro guide. Within that questionnaire of the pro guide, it considers internal and external factors of what the consumer is looking for within a club, and clubs within a club. But by that information that comes in through our pro guide, it really helps us gather the needs and the wants of that prospective member. And then when we turn around and send the pro guide to the club, the membership person, and he or she gets that information, they're going to know a lot about the consumer's wants before they ever get there.
Yep, you're exactly right. And one point that I want to hit on, Karen, too, with you is that we get the question a lot, or I guess it's not a question, but a concern from consumers that says, "Oh, this club has 1,200 members. It's 5 golf courses. It's a major facility. How am I ever going to? I don't want to be a number. I want to know people, and how am I going to, you know, meet people and then have my own group?" And the truth of the matter is, whether the club's 1,200 members or 300, you're probably only going to have that core group of 6 or 7 couples anyway. So you should never be discouraged with a bigger facility and think that you would be just another number. And quite frankly, your liver won't be able to handle it if you have 22 couples and you're going all season with parties every night. So would you agree with that, Karen, that statement?
I agree with that wholeheartedly. I agree with what Lynn said. Your membership person is typically going to be prepared for your likes and dislikes and want to speak to that and be ready and set to help you meet your expectations. And to what you're saying, Jason, you can only have so much of a social life. There were times when our social calendar was so robust that I would joke that I see my members meeting themselves on the way back. You know, they were literally spending their entire day at the club, and they were looking forward to Thursday where there wasn't anything on the calendar and they could just rest. It was really, you can't overcommit yourself socially. So you make a good point.
Absolutely. So, Lynn, I'm going to bring you back on here now and talk about exit strategy. And again, this is something that isn't necessarily fun to talk about, but it's important that we address it and just have some sort of plan in place should you have to leave the club. So there's a number of different scenarios where exits take place, whether it's an equity club or, as Lynn will talk about, a refundable versus non-refundable membership. And so, Lynn, can you just give an understanding of what you would do and how you would posture for an exit? And then maybe you could lead up to that with giving a taste of what the club industry is like post Great Recession 2009, because it really changed the dynamics of resignation lists and how people leave a club.
Yes, you're 100% correct. But refundable, non-refundable. And again, I hate to keep saying, go back to the club docs, because they are all written differently for each club. It really, and I'll kind of skip ahead a little bit and maybe jump to how we got to recallable and refundable memberships, Jason, and the 2000 and the 08, 09 downturns, when I know down in Southwest Florida, we had the perfect storm. We had oversaturation, we had overpricing, and then you know, there was a big drop, and people forgot that what they bought was a stock certificate. It was a piece of stock. Stock goes up, stock goes down, but we never had any downturns, so they never thought about that. But so it was during that time that clubs, and we couldn't sell clubs. Everybody's membership pricing slipped way back down and couldn't sell them. So clubs came up with you know, less expensive, non-equity. Some of them are refundable, most of them are non-refundable memberships. And so it just and I can remember specifically a person walked to my door and he said, "Lynn, I'd rather give you, you know, $40,000 instead of the $80,000 that you're asking for, and I know that I'm never going to get it back, and I just pay my dues and I go on." So that was a major turn with the downturns. But that's also when all the resignation lists grew. So you see on this chart here, the obligations to the club, the 3-in, 1-out program. I was at a club that we were 4-to-1, and all that means is that the club had to sell 4 memberships before they would take one off of the resignation list. Some of them are 2-to-1, some of them that are full now, they go 1 on, 1 out. But again, every club says something different. So you need to understand that. And so it's just as important going in as it is to, okay, you know, I have a health problem, I want to leave the club. What is the club's resignation policy? It's a great question. Write that down. What is the club's resignation policy? Yeah, you hate to talk about that when you're so excited about joining the club, but to cover your base, you know, hey, I just want to know, I hope it never happens, but what is the club's resignation policy and what do the documents say? Really important.
And Lynn, refundable versus non-refundable memberships, you know, really post 2009, those got popular for the club industry. And you do consultations every day for folks. Are you finding that most people are going the non-equity, non-refundable avenue, or do you still see people that are looking for equity positions in clubs?
You know, it's funny, Jason, that you say that. Well, since everything turned down and prices came back down, you know, people started weighing it a little bit more. Can I justify this? Am I going to get my money out of it? And so I've only had, honest to gosh, I think 2 people in the last 5 years that said, no, I definitely want an equity membership. Some clubs, that's the only thing that they offer, and that's good. But, you know, some people say, look, yes, I want equity. I want to own a piece of the rock. I want to be involved with the club. And what happened along with the non-equity memberships, you know, it made it real easy for people to leave a club, you know, and you hate to see members go away because it's an economic impact. But the less expensive non-equity ones, they are the biggest attraction, you know, in a lot of the clubs that I'm working with right now.
And is it fair to say, Lynn, that in terms of the overall financial health of a club, should another downturn occur, that it's actually better to have non-refundable programs, so that way there's not a run on the bank where they could leave the club in a very, very tough position?
Well, you know, all of the memberships, equity memberships, if you're an equity membership, every club has you can always get rid of your membership. I mean, you're always going to put it on a resignation list. There has to be some form of refundability. Some people's equities, look, there's clubs in this town there, they're 100,000 to join, but their equity, it's still equity, but they only get 1% back. Or a club you'll get 50% back or 80% of the then going rate. Again, they're all over the place, and it just matters on how they're written. And I've been involved in writing some of those, so I'm just so sensitive to it that I want to go through those documents to understand that.
Very, very good. And the final question here is, I know we get asked this a lot, is whether I own a equity membership or even a non-equity, am I allowed as a consumer to sell my membership to a friend or someone that I come across to exit a club? Can you share your thoughts on that?
Yes, I don't really see that much anymore, Jason. I know I've been involved with some early clubs that were built that was a group of individuals, you know, and they let their founding members buy 2 or 3 of them at the then going price, hang on to them, and then they could sell them on the open market. But you just really don't see that anymore. The club is going to control that process, you know, 98% of the time. So no, I don't see that very often.
Very good. I think we would just wrap up with that, you know, on this topic with, you know, it's a major decision. It's a major financial decision. So having, you know, legal counsel review those docs might not be a bad decision. You spend $500 or $600 to do that. However, I would say that I wouldn't expect the club to change the language in their docs because of that. Otherwise, they'd be doing that every day. So as long as there's nothing major in those docs that could really get you into a pickle, I would say that you're probably more than likely going to be safe going forward.
Jason, I want to add one little color to that, because a very prominent attorney out of Chicago was joining a club that I was involved in very early on, and I respected his opinion very much. And so I sent him the club documents. This is very early on in the program. I sent him the documents, and I said, Mr. So-and-so, I said, did you read the documents? And he said, I did. And I said, is there anything that you don't like? And he says, well, he laughed. He said, well, let me ask you this. He said, if I said to you that there was something in those docks I didn't like, were you going to change them? And I said, no. And he says, so then why do I need the dock? Why do I need it? But I either enjoy what the club is offering and the amenities and the social stuff that it has. Otherwise, I'm not going to join. So that really put a little light on it for me.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. So Karen, bringing you back in here, you've made it through the questions in the beginning about club structure and those socialization opportunities and exit strategy, and now you've narrowed your decision down to 2 to 5 clubs. You're ready to make a decision. Help a consumer walk through what that's like at the end. You know, when you're trying to pull the trigger and make the right decision, and you got 3 great candidates. What questions or what are some tips that they could help them with that decision process?
Well, my hope for every club consumer is that they can have an aha moment. And I think that can only come from an experience at the club. And so hopefully every club that you're considering is offering some sort of discovery package, and giving you a chance to truly experience their club as though you were a member, if only just for a day. And I would think that most clubs do have some sort of discovery opportunity, some sort of taste, or trial. And you certainly want to take advantage of that at anything that you're seriously considering, because sometimes you really, just like you see something in a store that you simply must have, often a club will have that effect on you as well. I would encourage consumers to think about convenience, because it might not be as important to you when you're 30 something as it will be when you're 50 something, but at some point the proximity of the club is going to have added value. So think about what is going to be most convenient in as far as how you will use your club and access your club. And then, which might mean moving at some point, or if you're a part-timer, you might want to have a little second home or a great rental accommodation. But you definitely want to ask yourself, do I want this? Can I afford this? And am I going to let myself indulge in this product? And remember that it is an indulgence. As much as we talk about the investment, it is truly a luxury item, and you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt, and be willing to allow yourself to have this fun, treat yourself and do this thing that you enjoy. And I just think that somewhere in the process, if everyone has done what they're supposed to, you're going to have that aha moment that I'm talking about. Something's going to say to you, this is it, this is the one. I hope.
And Karen, what would you say that a consumer should ask a membership director? Why should I choose your club over the XYZ club? Is that common practice? Do you see that a lot in the industry?
Absolutely. I have had that question posed to me many, many times, and again, my answer is always going to be obviously based on what club I work at and which consumer I'm dealing with, whom I've developed a bit of a relationship with by this time. And I'm going to answer honestly, and I'm going to tell them that this is what we have over that club, or I might even say, I really want you to consider that club because it might be a better fit for you, and I want you to be happy. Most people in our industry are genuinely motivated towards other people's happiness, and we certainly don't stand to gain anything by cajoling a new member into the club and then not having them be blissfully happy and want to stay. So remorse is not the business we want to be in. We want to be in the happy business.
Very good. And I think I would just round that out with be prepared to move within the community. Real estate is such an important factor of the decision process. And if you're 58 years old and you still have 3 years out before retirement, and a small condo or a villa is appropriate now, but you can envision, buying a single family home with a pool and whatnot for the family to come down after you retire, you want to be able to make sure that there's real estate options within that development, so that way you don't have to switch clubs and start over fresh. So you always want to think through that as well for future real estate acquirements.
True.
So, Karen, one last final question for you that every consumer should really have a good, clear understanding of what to expect as a prospective member. So, if you're going and you're visiting clubs, should I expect free golf? Should I expect lunch and dinner? You know, what is the general rule, if you will, for or procedures for the private club industry on prospective members?
Well, every club is going to have different nuances. Some are stricter than others in their membership approval process. It to me, I mean, I'm going to say 98% of all clubs want you to experience the club because they know that's what's going to sell the club for them. So they want you to see their beautiful golf course and try their wonderful cuisine and certainly meet their fun, friendly members. Should it be complimentary? Not necessarily. It is in some cases, and it isn't in some cases. It could have bearing on their actual marketing budget, or it could have bearing on what they see is in their best interest. Because, you know, quite frankly, I've been both ways as a membership director. I've invited people to a, say, Wine and Nine event, and it was complimentary, and found that the quality of the prospective candidate wasn't as high as when I offered that exact same event for a fee, because the people who were willing to pay for it were more genuinely interested than the people who were looking for the freebie. So there's a lot of different ways to look at it. Will it be complimentary? Should you expect it to be complimentary? No, you shouldn't expect it, and no, it won't necessarily be. If it is, what a treat. You know, we often treated people to a round of golf and lunch. That was very common. But then we would have the paid Wine and Nine that we would introduce, you know, 20 or 30 people to. So lots of different ways that clubs might go at that. They definitely want you to meet your members. Most clubs are going to try to pair you with members when you're playing their golf course, if possible. Or like we did in my most recent club, we had an ambassador committee that would literally extend an invitation to prospective members to join them at a club event. Typically that was on us. That was a complimentary part of the marketing budget. But sometimes when we had a large membership drive, again, it was a paid event. A morning tee time in the heart of season, that's probably a stretch in most clubs. They're certainly going to do their best to get you on the golf course, but it may be a less preferred tee time because obviously they're going to put their members first, and you should want that in the club that you're joining. Definitely we want you to let them know you found us, or found them through us, gosh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great points there, especially on the tee times in the heart of the season. You know, we used to get consumers that were a little frustrated when they wanted to go visit a club that they couldn't get out at 8:30. But when you talk through it with them and help them understand that, you know, if you're a member a year from now from there, are you going to want prospective members out there on the golf course when you're here during the winter or the whoever season months? And they appreciate that, understand it. So yeah, as much as a morning tee time would be nice, I would expect, you know, late morning, early afternoon. And then the final point on the tell about Golf Life Navigators, which is important, is the clubs that know of GLN and who we are, they know about the Pro Guide, and they know that if you've spent 12 to 15 minutes completing it, that you're probably not a tire kicker if you've come through us. And so your chances of you know, possibly getting that complimentary round of golf or a lunch or a dinner, or you're going to get moved to the top of the list, put it that way, as opposed to someone that's calling off the street that could be a tire kicker. So by all means, let them know that you found the club or best match to that club through GLN, as it certainly will help things. Okay, so we went through quite a bit there in a half an hour, and you know, some of the key takeaways that we wanted you to walk away with today is out of the gate, determine if the club is bundled, non-bundled, developer owned, you name it. Once you understand the current constructs of the club, it's going to help you make the better decision down the road as to where you want to be and what your position is going to be at that club. Very key to understand. The differences between member-owned, developer-owned, or corporate, it all depends. If you are fine with not having a board of directors to make decisions and and want to just be able to play golf or use it for business purposes, a corporate-owned golf community would be a fantastic. It's for profit, so you know they're going to be putting significant dollars into the aesthetics of the community. But if you want to have a say and a vote, then a member-owned club would be the right spot for you. So those are the things you really want to think through in trying to decide a club. How much money will the club have invested into future amenities is important. You know, it shows that they're going to stay competitive with the other clubs in the landscape. As an example, in Southwest Florida, we have 157 private clubs in really a 40-mile radius. I mean, so it's tremendous, and it's like that across the Sun Belt. So clubs have to stay competitive, and the only way they're going to do that is to make sure that their assets aren't depreciating and that they're investing into the future by all means. Be sure to meet other members of the club. It's a great strategy. We had a client in the other day that drove into the gates of a club, and there happened to be a guy who was out just doing some flower work in his yard. So he pulled up in his driveway and went and had a conversation with him. It was just, he got a chance to meet a resident and asked him some questions about the club and had a great conversation with him. So that gives you kind of an ancillary view of what the culture might be like at that facility, and does it feel right. Think through your exit strategy, understand your position, as Lynn was so diligently focused on with the docs. So you really understand what those documents say and understand your position at the club. So when you do invest and write that check, you walk out of there knowing exactly where you stand, and there will be no surprises down the road. Very, very key. And don't be afraid to ask the membership director, why is your club better than XYZ down the street? Let them share. I saw a great best practice a couple weeks ago, shadowing a client that was in town at a club, and he asked the membership director, he said, you know, excluding your club, what club would you join? And it was a really great question because it made her think, and she gave him an honest answer, and he appreciated that. So a little tip there, that, you know, so you can get some good feedback from the membership directors when you're in front of them. And at the end of the day, this is $1 million decision, especially if you're going to purchase real estate along with the club search. But you know, you spend $300,000 on a home or a villa and a club membership, and then 15 years of dues, you're right at that $1 million mark. So use resources like us. You know, Lynn is always available. Karen, myself, we're always here to answer questions, help get you in the right direction if you're a little unsure on some things, and definitely take advantage of things like that before you make that decision, because we want to make sure you're a happy member, and by all means the clubs want to make sure they have happy and loyal members as well, because the last thing that they want are people that are not happy there and that want to exit. So this is our chance for questions. If you have any questions at all, feel free to put them in the chat box. Before you sign off, though, there might be some interest if you are combining real estate in your club search. On Wednesday, May 1st, we're having another webinar to bring in some folks to talk about how to make that a successful coordinated search using the golf kind of stats and facts alongside real estate market values, and help determine if your investment is going to be a good one into your home. And on Thursday, May 9th, if you are considering new construction, I highly implore you to attend that one as well. It's really going to talk about how to understand those developer docs, make sure that you're getting everything that you're paying for, and you're investing in new construction into a community that's going to thrive in the future. So by all means, please feel free to sign up for those. And I put Lynn Josephson's contact information down there. That's his email. Feel free to email him, and you have a phone conversation. He'll walk you through and help you any way that he can on your questions. And there is no strange questions. He's been in the industry for 35 years and seen a lot, so he'll be able to give you a good insight on everything.
I'm strange, so I answer strange questions. So.
Yeah, that's true. I'm glad you said it. And then finally, in your chat box, Tyler has posted a little survey link. If you have a second, you want to click on that. Really appreciate the feedback, because it helps us make these webinars that much better for the next group that comes in. But Lynn, I'm going to have you jump on here. John had a question I think that's probably fit for you to answer. Are there pros and or cons to a club that transitions from a developer to a privately owned and managed versus a transition from a developer to member owned? Lynn, you might still be on mute.
Sorry, there I go.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, going back to the documents, I know at one particular club that I was involved with that the developer went to the equity members and they said, you have first option to buy the club from us. And this particular club, they passed. They did not want to do it. So who did buy it and take it over was a management company. Okay. So again, what are the either consequences or benefits of it being member owned over a golf management company? Again, now a golf management company, they're still going to put together a little advisory committee of the members of the club, and they will be able to have input. But just remember, the members aren't going to have total say-so if it's taken over and managed by a management company.
Very
Did I
good,
answer
Lynn. Yeah, I think that's really good insight. And on the topic of management companies, what we see a lot of times, and you'll see this if you're a consumer seeking membership, it might currently be managed by a group like Troon or Hampton Golf or Club Corp, and you'll want to know, okay, how long is that contract in place for? Because there could be a transition, and I would say, you might agree or disagree on this, that 9 times out of 10, what happens is when that contract expires, the members decide they want to give it a run and take it over, and then ends up back in the hands of a management company 3 or 4 years later. But a very important question to ask there.
Jason, and to follow up with that, here's one that we've never even talked about. It was a member-owned club. It was developer-owned. Then the members owned it for like 25, 30 years. And then all of a sudden, this private club decided to go with a management company. And I asked some of those board members that made that decision, I said, can I ask you why you, the members, turned it over to a management company? They gave me probably the best description that I understood. They said, Lynn, we were going into our committee meetings and our board meetings and our annual meetings, and we were all arguing amongst ourselves, our friends we were arguing with, or what we should and shouldn't do. They said, by bringing in the management company, it took us off of those decisions. And we hired them because we think they're in that business and that they're the professionals. And we now don't have to fight amongst ourselves going forward. Very interesting, but not unrare.
That's a good answer.
Yes, it was. Yeah. We had a couple questions that had come in via the form submission, so I'll read those out. One of them was how do we find out the history of weather-related impacts, particularly in the southeastern coastal communities? That's a very good question. And if you're looking at Florida, the Carolinas, obviously there's the threat of hurricanes. And so how does that affect the golf courses? And is there essentially a history of that? I don't know of a specific website that you can go to see those types of things. But I can tell you first account of living through Hurricane Irma. And then Karen just went through, what hurricane did you have up in the Carolinas last year, Karen? Was it Michael?
Well, yeah, we didn't have it, but North Carolina did. We had Matthew in 2016.
That's right. And so I can tell you from the club industry side that it is extremely prepared when those warnings and watches even begin. There's committees, and your HOAs and your communities are coordinating efforts. And so the preparedness is really remarkable, how everything's, it's different than a tornado occurring where you don't have a lot of time, but hurricanes are come well prepared. The maintenance team ensures that all of the landscaping is taken care of, whatnot. And the club industry itself saw very little damage for the most part, even as a direct hit from Hurricane Irma in Naples, because of the preparedness. Now there was clubs that experienced quite a bit of flooding, but they, their insurance programs took care of that, and they were back up on their feet within literally weeks to a few months. So it's amazing how resilient the club communities are, and the real estate in particular on these coastal lines are so code restricted with post Hurricane Andrew and all the new building and construction codes in the 2000s that the homes didn't see any issues at all. It was more of a flooding issue, but as we know, flooding goes away, so it didn't wreak too much damage.
Jason, if I might add, when I saw that question, I did notice that some, like our Chamber of Commerce has a really good history and weather section, and that might be the case in a lot of areas for people who are, you know, concerned about that type of thing, that they can use as a resource.
Very good point. Very good point. One question came in, how does one know the financial condition of the club? Many clubs say they are well managed and financially solvent to go under in the not too distant future, or they could go. To Karen's point, ask for that annual report. You can certainly get that. A club is more than willing and should be to show you their financials. I would even recommend, if you're a numbers person, to meet with the finance chairman. I'm sure he or she would be happy to sit down with you and discuss, you know, the financials of the club. But I would say this though, is don't go into a club and looking in those docs expecting to see a for-profit entity, because private clubs certainly are not. I mean, they're non-for-profit. They're just they're in the dues business. So those dues, each dollar gets allocated to ensure that the property in the club is healthy. So you're gonna see a lot of red numbers, which isn't a bad thing. Just keep that in mind. Sometimes that's difficult for someone that's led a Fortune 500 company and is a prominent CEO to understand the dynamics of a private club. It's much, much different. How does the transition from an HOA and equity golf membership structure to a bundled community affect property value? I don't think you see a lot of that. That's a very rare occurrence, unless Lynn knows some that I'm not sure of. But typically, a bundled community starts with a developer or development master plan and stays that way. Perhaps it could break off into an equity or non-equity structure post bundled community, but very rarely would it go from equity to bundled. And the main reason is because if you had 60% of residents in that community and you had to force them into being members of the club and part of the due structure, that would be one heck of a fight. So I'm sure that that's a very big rarity across the industry. And then explain the different types of golf memberships. Typically, you have your full golf membership. I can tell you on our Pro Guide, about 80% of people, that's what they're looking for. 20% or so are saying that if it wasn't a full golf membership, that they'd be interested into an annual membership. I don't think you'll find those as much as you would have 5-6 years ago post Great Recession. They're still out there, but you know, during those years, it became pretty popular for clubs to get people back into the club. Junior executive memberships, which would mean that you're under the age basically of 56, and a lot of these Sunbelt communities oftentimes have half dues, half initiation until you get to that age, and then it kicks into full dues. So if you're a younger prospective member, I would definitely ask for that. And then a lot of the clubs have sports memberships, so where you have access to the golf course, but you would pay just a little bit more in a tee time. As for instance, we just placed somebody into a community that has a sports membership that he purchased, and he can still get tee times, but he can't book them 4 days out. He has to book them 2, and instead of paying $40, he pays $65. So there's offset there and some math you have to do when deciding which membership is best for you. And that's all the questions that I had that were submitted via email. If there's any others, feel free to, you can either unmute yourself and ask your question or type them into the chat box, whatever you'd like to do. Thank you, Debbie. Appreciate that. Well, very good. Looks like everybody has learned some stuff today. We're going to send this recording over. Tyler will send it via email, so you'll have it. It'll be a link to, I believe we'll put it on YouTube. And then we'll send a copy of the presentation as well. And you have Lynn's email. By all means, wear him out. Make sure he's busy so I don't have to make sure he's busy. Call him, and we're happy to help you any way that we can. And when you're meeting with those clubs, by all means, if you could help us out, just tell them you found them through GLN. That really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim.